What is up, guys? Your boy DFS Jimmy back again this week, breaking down a brand new course for the tour and for Fanshare Sports this week. If you're not already a member, make sure you get over to fansharesports.com. Check out their Fanshare Pro package, not only for golf, but for football as well. We got a lot coming up for football season. Make sure you get over to fansharesports.com. Check those guys out. And also make sure you hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button, give me a follow on Twitter, all that good jazz. Need all that to happen. Very much appreciate it. Getting into what we've got going this week, the PGA Tour is making its way back to the Detroit metro area for the first time since 2009. Formerly the Buick Open, is now going to be the Rocket Mortgage Classic. It's going to be a brand new course for the PGA Tour, a brand new course for the players. Not anything we've seen before. An original Donald Ross design, though, dating way back. It is Detroit Golf and Country Club, or Detroit Golf Club, rather. It is a par 72 laid out in bluegrass and bent grass greens. Interesting golf course, interesting Ross design. Kind of reminds me of Firestone in, sort of the research. But what's going to be different this week is everyone is going to be guessing. Everyone's going to be starting fresh. There is no course history to go off of. There is no historical data. There have never been professional competitive rounds contested at Detroit Golf Club. So very different, and going to be a lot of question marks for us this week. Because of that, we obviously don't have the same data sets that we're used to working with. We don't have the same amount of course information, don't have course history, don't have a style of player that has played or plays well at certain tracks and whatnot. So going to have to go a bit different this week, but don't worry, got you guys covered. I'm going to look at who've been good DraftKings point scorers, all part of the Fanshare Pro package, by the way, at Donald Ross courses, as well as who has scored well DraftKings points relatively on some historical or comparable courses based on grass type, based on length, things like that. But as you can see behind me, kind of has that Firestone-y type of vibe, very much up and back, narrow type of Parkland style holes, lots of cross bunkering. Several blind shots for the guys to contend with this week. I think 4 water hazards on the property comes into play on several of them. You will see some balls in the water off the left-hand side of a couple of these par 5s here. The players are going to be trying to reach into. Brutally long 635-yard par 5 on the docket this week. There are 2 courses here at Detroit Golf Club. Only one hole from the south course is going to be utilized. Otherwise, it is going to be the entirety of the north course. The back 9 is set up as normal. Holes lengthened and such. The front 9 on the scorecard that you'll see this week is where it kind of gets, it's just a little bit different what the normal north course is. But it is like I said, Ross design, had been recently renovated. A lot of work went into getting the PGA Tour back into the Detroit area. I know that the Detroit area in general is pretty excited to have a tournament back in the area, and look for good fan attendance this week. A lot of big names committed to this. Obviously, Ricky Fowler, being the Rocket Mortgage spokesperson, has committed to this tournament, and oddly enough, sets up really well for Ricky's style of game, in my opinion. As I mentioned, it is a narrow driving golf course, Parkland style, lots of trees, lots of cross bunkering. What's going to determine how tough this course plays this week is how fast are the greens going to get, how long are they going to let the rough get. And with nobody ever having played here before, there's going to be some folks that are going to be on site there that will be able to get you some information kind of as you get closer to lock this week. But in general, we don't really know how they're going to set this course up. We don't really know how this course is going to play. I would imagine, based on the 7,300 yards and what I've seen, that it plays as one of the tougher tracks on tour, and that just has to do with the length of it. 7,300 yards, par 72. We are getting all 4 par 5s this week, but you got a lot of long holes in here. You got some short ones too that are gettable, but you got a lot of long holes in here. And if guys aren't in the fairway, and some of these fairways seem to be pretty narrow, pretty tough to hit, if you're not in the fairway, it could make getting to some of these what appear to be fairly smallish greens, definitely below tour average on green size, and definitely over tour average in course length, could definitely set up as a recipe for guys to bring scrambling a little more into play. Definitely long iron ball striking is going to come into play this week, but it seems to be it seems to set up on paper, at least, it's a fairly tough test of golf, and one I'm looking forward to watching this week, seeing how the guys respond to this new track on tour. So without any further ado, let's get into the very limited card that we've got this week, and then we'll take a look at my model, and as well as some DraftKings points scored based on Donald Ross designed courses that players have played well at. That's also a bit baked into my model, and then DraftKings points scored based on length of the track, bent grass, and type of course. So we've got some things to look at to kind of maybe help guide us this week. But at the end of the day, probably a little bit extra research is going to be needed in terms of generating your player pool, and very much up in the air as to what types of golfers can have success at a track like this and how difficult the track is going to play. So without any further ado, this is the card. As I mentioned, hole number 3 highlighted in red here. That is the one hole from the south course that the players are going to be working in. Everything else is actually the north course. Par 3s do appear to be fairly difficult here. A couple of easy ones, a couple of very long ones. And then the par 5s, all fairly long. Definitely gettable in 2 on a couple of them, but the par 5 fourth, 635 yards. Very few people in the field are going to be attempting this in 2. Very few people in the field are going to be getting there in 2. You do have some short holes. The first hole, for example, less than 400 yards. The third hole, as I mentioned, less than 400 yards. The 8th hole, less than 400 yards. And the 13th hole, all less than 400-yard par 4s, where you can expect guys to be able to not be taken out of a hole by length. Sure, your bombers can put it all the way down there and give themselves an awkward wedge range, or your short hitters can just put it out there and give themselves a good, comfortable club. I think most importantly, though, you may see some of the bombers clubbing down on some of the shorter, tighter holes, as there will be a penalty for missing the fairway here. Especially if you end up blocked out by a tree, things like that. You don't have a good line at the green. The course appears on paper and through the videos and what I've seen to be pretty difficult with regard to being on the wrong side or being out of position off of the tee. Several dog legs that we've noticed, or that I've noticed around here. As I mentioned, the track reminds me of Firestone. Accuracy does seem to be fairly important here. Greens do have a decent bit of elevation change or undulation that I can see. 18 specifically has got a pretty big valley in the green, so pin placements will be crucial this week, and I imagine a lot of players get themselves into a little bit of trouble on these smallish greens if they try to go for a tight pin. Probably see a lot of guys going just for middle cut or center of the green this week. Keep themselves in play and keep the big numbers out of or off of the table. As I mentioned, length of rough and pin placements will determine the difficulty here this week. But suffice to say, 7,300 yards is no joke. Pretty good length, even for a par 72 for the professional players. And without any more, we don't really know much about this track other than it's got some good Donald Ross key features, the elevated greens, the drop-offs, things like that. Got a lot of cross bunkering, several blind tee shots, one on the par 3 fifth, several blind shots around dog legs, things like that. So placement definitely going to be crucial. Very much sets up as an old style track, but very lengthy for an old style type of track. So kind of a nice blend of old school golf and old school setup with modern day length. Be interested to see how it affects players this week, but my gut tells me that long iron ball striking is going to be important, and that we don't see a huge crazy birdie fest here at this track. We see a good test of golf, and the course superintendent is challenging the players with the setup. So moving on, as I mentioned, we don't have course history, so we don't really know what types of golfers have had success or can have success at a track like this. What we do have, though, is DraftKings points on average for Ross-designed courses and DraftKings points on average for comparable courses, and then I've averaged those two together to kind of get a picture for DraftKings point score, because that's really what we're looking for. Bear in mind there's a lot of small sample size that can kind of contribute to some of these players popping up here, specifically Joaquin Niemann, Kramer Hitchcock, Denny McCarthy, some of these guys that just haven't been around for too long but had one good performance on a Ross course or one good performance on a comp course, put themselves right there in the mix. Not saying that Joaquin Niemann and Kramer Hitchcock aren't viable options, just a small sample size to go from. But interesting when you drop down to the third guy there based on average DK points, does rank number one in my model. Dustin Johnson has shown over the years to play well on tough tracks, and even though he is a bomber, can definitely put himself in some really strong positions off of the tee, and as long as he's staying out of trouble, I can see no reason why Dustin Johnson shouldn't be ranked number one in my model this week. Interesting. Hideki Matsuyama, number two, nothing to argue about there. Has played well on Ross courses, has played well on comparable length courses with bent grass. Definitely putts better on the bent grass, does Hideki. Been playing really well this year. See no reason not to agree with that number two ranking there for Hideki Matsuyama in the model. Makes all the sense in the world. Can definitely see Brandt Snedeker playing well at comp courses and comp tracks like this. Great long irons, plays the wind well, plods along, very strategic type of golfer. Ricky Fowler, ranked number 7 in my overall model, has played well and earned DraftKings points at both comparable style and size courses as well as Donald Ross designed courses. Byung Hun An, no surprise, he kind of pops up there on the the comparable length courses. 86 DraftKings points gained on average in several different attempts there. Byung Hun An, one of the best long iron ball strikers in the world, just can't putt at all. Same thing with Gary Woodland. Be interested to see Gary coming off of his first major win, what his performance, what his interest level is at a tournament like this. But Gary Woodland definitely has the type of game that you would expect to excel at a track like this. Can hit the stinger like nobody's business, and that shot will probably come in handy on some of these shorter par fours where pull and driver may not be in the best interest of some of these golfers, especially if they're a bit erratic. Finding the fairway, I do believe, is going to be a premium this week. The course could get softened up just a bit. There is some rain projected on Tuesday, not a ton, but maybe enough to soften it up for a day or two before everything gets back to running like it should over the weekend. But as you can see, there's a few golfers that tend to play well, and there's on these types of tracks, both Ross and the comp style track. But what's interesting is they kind of span the spectrum, right? You got Dustin Johnson, Brandt Snedeker, back to back with DraftKings points earned, Danny McCarthy, and Kevin Tway. I mean, huge bombers and real course plotters and strategic guys. So very much like the track this week. It's hard to say whether it's a bomber's course or not. I do think the length is going to be a bit prohibitive, especially if things are a little wet for some of the shorter hitters. That said, if things aren't wet and they're just kind of normal conditions or even drier, expect that any of the shorter hitters can compete, even though it's a 7,300 yard course. Do want to shift and just kind of show you the model from the beginning to the end. Dustin ranked 1, Decky 2, Benny on 3, Billy Horschel 4, Bubba Watson 5, Michael Thompson 6. That's an interesting pick. Obviously, one of the lowest DraftKings points scored in the top 10 there. Sink and Stephanie 2. Interesting course for a guy like Stuart Sink. Maybe not this year, but last year he was playing really well and really excelling on the mid-range par fours. A lot of this course wrapped up in those mid-range par fours. And then Ricky and Woodland, as I mentioned, Snedeker, Uline, rounding out your top 12. Of course, CT Pan and JT Poston are a couple of interesting golfers for me, just based on they've played well at tracks like this. Shorter tracks, bent grass greens, and tracks that require a little bit of technical strategy and positioning. It's not just a straight up bombing around their track. Interesting names for me on those two guys. Want to see where the market shakes out on them. Scrolling down, a couple of guys that have good marks on the DK point scoring side, maybe not as highly ranked in the model. Kevin Tway, Bud Colley, been playing pretty well. Interested to see what Bud could do on a course like this. Ryan Moore, definitely think Ryan Moore rates higher than what my model has him rated at this week, based on where his DraftKings points are and plus what he's shown this week, because we don't have current results from this week posted in here yet. Charlie Hoffman, this is the type of track Charlie could run well on. Been playing a bit better, as time wears on in the season. Joaquin Niemann, not as concerned about as maybe some other people would be if they were to just look at all the green in his history here. While he has played well, it's a small sample size in the comp courses and the Donald Ross track. That kind of, take me a little bit away from Niemann. Would not be surprised at all if he played well, but I think it's a little bit small sample size that's driving his result there. A couple of Duffner, Steele, again, two types of plotters, the good long iron players that could go well. Jimmy Walker fits that same category. Scrolling down, Ollie Schneider-Jans is interesting, obviously playing really, really poorly right now in his current form, but has played well at Ross tracks in the past, as well as that comparable course range. Won't find him in any of my lineups personally, but can absolutely see the reason somebody might want to roster him. Austin Cook is interesting just based on his history there. Of course, the model doesn't love him. His current form's way off, but has shown on these types of tracks as well as the comp courses that he can put some scores together. So all in all, guys, a lot of big question marks this week. Do not believe there is one prototypical type of golfer that is going to find success here. I do think it's the type of course that if your long iron ball striking is on and you can scramble and get up and down a little bit here at a track like this, that you can find yourself competitive over what is likely to be a fairly difficult 4 days of golf. Again, it's not going to be anything like the Opens or anything like that, but I do think that if you find yourself just on the wrong side of the fairway or into the rough, it could really make getting yourself up and down in par kind of difficult for these folks. So would not argue with anybody for wanting to take a plotter's approach. Conversely, definitely can see where several of these bombers like a Dustin Johnson or a Bubba Watson that if they can just find the fairway, even if they get close enough, as long as they're not blocked out by trees, there's some short enough holes on this track that they can really take advantage of. Not to mention, going to be a couple of the guys in the field, the only couple of guys in the field that have any shot at reaching that 635-yard par 5 and 2. So do expect to see some eagles because there are a couple of reachable par 5s, and it is a par 72, so it should encourage some additional scoring. But overall, I think it may be one of the more difficult par 72s that guys see throughout the year. And as I mentioned earlier, pay attention to the weather, see what the news reports look like as we lead into the week, and what the guys are saying on the talking heads on TV, rather, what they're saying about how the course is setting up, how it's shaping up, if there's expected to be a bit rough or a bit soft, or a bit firm. Because that's going to make all the difference in the world. If the greens are firm, they're not receptive, they're small enough, and you're hitting long enough irons into them that guys can find themselves running right through greens pretty easily. A lot of bunkering around. And really, there are a couple holes that are going to force guys to take less than driver off of the tee. So be interested to see what type of golfer prevails if there's a single type at the end of this week. But all in all, I do think it's one of those courses that anybody in the field can compete on if their long iron ball striking is on, just because of the dynamic nature of the holes and how they change length throughout the course. There's quite a few of the shorter par 4s that will definitely encourage some scoring by the entire field. Some of the longer par 4s, again, like I mentioned, if you find yourself out of position, you can easily bring bogey and double into play, where the plotters may not do that, might have a longer iron in. They might not have that large score that blows up on them. But the long story short, and the lesson to take away from this video is no one really knows how this course is going to play. No one knows how this course is going to set up. So if you find an angle, or you take an approach that you feel like is the way to go, and you have confidence in it, then I would say go all in with it this week, and just see what happens, because really no one really has a great idea of a history and types of golfers that will succeed here. It's all speculation and a much more limited data set to go from than what we're used to. So that said, I'm going to be waiting. I'm going to follow my model pretty closely, and I'm going to try and stick to guys that fall into the top 20 of my model for building my player pool out. Based on the course length, hole length, and a little bit of Ross sprinkled in. So that's what I'll be doing this week. But find an angle you like and go with it, and stick to your guns this week. Might just work out for you. DFS Jimmy signing off for FanshareSports.com. Catch you guys later. See ya.